Happy Friday. Happy Friday. How many people are happy that it's Friday? Yeah, me too. All right. I welcome everybody. It's great to see this turnout. It's always wonderful to see all your smiling faces. So want to really encourage you to come to both of our formations next week. On Monday, we'll be dedicating our healing circle, so we're going to be walking outside, having a dedication for that. Our dance team is going to perform for us. It'll be a very special time on Monday. A week from today, we will have our Christmas formation, and that's going to feature 4 students reading from a beautiful Christmas children's book that every time I read it, it kind of makes me cry a bit. And we're going to sing Christmas songs, and we're going to light candles, and it's going to be a very special time, too. I'm super proud to show, we're doing this for the first time ever. You're going to see little clips of 3 different students from just this last fall doing their Heilsgeschichte. We had Kaylee Phillips on Friday, and now we'll have 3 others. Obviously, they all spoke for about an hour, so this is just a tiny bit. But especially for those of you who have not done your Heils project yet, this is a good way for you to see what it's about. They are doing this completely from memory, and we're doing it right in the middle of the Old Testament story. So we're going to pray, and then you'll get to see these videos, and then I'll introduce the next part. Please pray with me. Lord of love, Lord of light, Lord of every little thing in our lives, we give you praise. And we thank you that you have gotten us through another week. Open our eyes that we may see you blessing us and caring for us, and open our eyes so that we may see how we are to be your love and blessing to the world. I thank you for all the students who will be presenting today, and I ask that you would bless them. And thank you for the hard work that every single student has done. Lord, just bless us as a campus community and help us to do your will. In the name of Jesus, amen. Now please hear Malachi, Lind, Z-Way, and Jared.
Now we move into Tribals of Confederacy, 2000 BC. The wilderness in the wilderness was 1240 BC. Now, the people were jealous of the Canaanites because they had good crops and stuff, and the Canaanites had what we call Baal worship. They worshipped multiple gods. So the problem here was syncretism, which was the second crisis. The first crisis was slavery. So the people wanted to mix Yahweh, their religion of Yahweh, to the Baal worshipped, so they can have better crops, just like the Baal worshippers of the Canaanites. And we call there's an ongoing cycle, we call the Judges cycle, where the people started worshiping the Baal worshipper, doing Baal worship. Second is that God lets the enemies defeat them. The people cry out, which is the 3rd stage. 4th stage is God raising what we call a judge or a military leader. Mm-hmm. And the 5th is when the judge is living, the people somewhat listen to the judge. And then the last stage is when the judge dies. The cycle continues over and over and over again. Some notable judges are Gideon, Samson, Deborah, and the last judge, Samuel, who was the last judge, but also the first prophet.
So next thing we go into is called United Monarchy. So during this time while they were in the place that they're at in Canaan, like everyone around them is doing like Baal worship. So they have like a human king. And these people say, oh, if their crops are better than us and they're never starving and all that stuff, we should be worshiping the same gods that they're worshiping, and we should also have like a human king as they do. And so they end up demanding like a human king. But then this is actually God's remedial will. God's ultimate will is for theocracy, which is God as king, but now they want a monarchy. So then God ends up saying, remedial will, okay, you have a king, but it has to be someone authority, right? But then the problem with these kings is that there's three kings, but then they end up creating two boxes. The box of nation state and the box of geography. Nation state means that only the people that are citizens of this nation of Israel, of this nation, will be part of the people of God, and only if you live within the territory of Israel will you become the people of God. So this is bad because it's not what God wants. Because again, connecting back to Exodus Sinai, we know that God wants a chosen covenant of all people out of all people groups, but now they're made exclusive, just the people of the nation state and geography. That's bad. So the first thing we have is Saul. He lives a fairly humble lifestyle. He doesn't amass too much wealth, but then he breaks the rules of holy war, so that's bad. The next king that we have is David. David is actually called a man after God's own heart, so he's a very good king, but then he ends up breaking also holy war by sleeping with somebody else's wife, Uriah, and then having him killed. So that's bad. And then the last one, final king, is Solomon. He does a lot by bringing lots of wealth to Israel, to the temple, the level of the temple. But then he's the worst out of all of them because he enslaves his own people, and the taxes go up, it's crazy. So he's the worst one.
The prophets tried to keep the power of the kings in check and try to keep theocracy alive. They were ultimately not successful. This then leads into the division where Solomon appoints, which is 922. Division, which is 922, and Solomon appoints Jeroboam as the slave leader in the north, head of slaves. And then Solomon dies, and Rehoboam is now crowned king. And then Jeroboam runs into the prophet Ahijah. Ahijah tears the cloth into 12 pieces and gives 10 to Jeroboam and says he'll be the new king of the north. Well, that scares Jeroboam, and he flees to Egypt. And Rehoboam then asks his advisors, the older advisors and the newer or younger advisors. The older advisors tell him that he needs to be kind to his people, not like his father at all. And the younger advisors say no. They're very power and money hungry. They say no. You need to be like your father, maybe even worse. Then Jeroboam comes back and tries to plead with Rehoboam. It's not be like this to the people. He doesn't listen, so that is the history reason for the division. And then the Geschichte reason is because Ahijah tears the cloths. And the history reason why the division continued was because Israel is now in the north and Judah is in the south. The Geschichte reason why, or the history reason why the division continued is because Judah was being attacked from the south by Pharaoh Shishak, and he can't fight two wars at once, one in the north border, one in the south border. And the Geschichte reason, he was told by the prophet, Shemaiah,
Yes.
told by happened because of Rehoboam's sins, and that God did this because of Rehoboam's sins, and so he should not fight it.
That's kind of tougher than it maybe looks. Thank you for the three of you. Yeah. It is really my honor and privilege to introduce the next four people to you. I think it takes a lot of bravery, too, to go to New York City, to go to the United Nations Conference, to negotiate subways and meet someone new and meet a lot of new people, and to talk about some really deep justice issues. But that's exactly what Riley, Jessica, and Larry did. And they're going to tell you about this time that they took at the beginning of November. I'm also appreciative of Daniel Miller, who will interview them. And if it might be that at the end, if you have questions, we will take some questions. We always want you as our student body to take risks, to care enough about justice that you go to new places and try to learn new things. And that's exactly what these students did. Please give them a warm welcome as they come up.
Good morning, everyone. So Riley Weissup, Jessica Raharjo, and Larry Ruffin recently had the privilege of participating in Mennonite Central Committee's United Nations Student Seminar. The theme of the seminar was Peace Building, Does the UN Matter? We have the privilege of hearing from them a little bit today. I'm going to ask them some questions, and yeah. So an introductory question. Where did you go? Where was the seminar held?
The seminar was held in New York City, New York. It was in a building that was right across from the United Nations building, called the Church Center, United Nations. And it was all of the seminars and the speakers and the conversations happened on the second floor of that building.
Okay. Who else was there?
So there were 35 students from 8 different schools from Canada and the US, as well as 4 MCC staff and 2 MCC kind of like volunteer young adults from South Korea.
Okay, so talk a little bit about what a day looked like. What was it like in New York, and yeah, what was happening in an average day at this seminar?
New York City is a lot of fun. Like, there's so much that you can do in New York City. I think my favorite part of being in New York is being able to experience all the different cultures in New York City. A typical day in the seminar usually starts with a morning devotion, and then we continued by diving down to the theme, which is Does the UN Matter? We engage and listen to different speakers, both from the UN and also from the people that are working for peace in conflicting countries.
Okay, all right. So as far as learning about the UN, can somebody talk a little bit about how the UN works? How does it not work? And how does it function? And how can we help? How can help be sent?
I can answer that. The UN is an interesting body. It really is an interesting body. That is why this year's theme is to discuss if the UN matters or not. There are a lot of people there fighting for like numerous interests, and the UN itself, they work for to make effort to build peace around the world by also meeting people's need at the same time. However, because there are just like so many interests that each country brings, it's hard to reach like a consensus at the end of every meeting. And like the UN that I had always imagined is like the UN with like rainbows, sunshines, and butterflies. But the fact is not like that. Like it's mostly about like blood, sweat, and tears being fought for.
Yeah. And can someone answer, what did you learn about the difference between peace building, peacekeeping, and peacemaking?
Yeah, so before going to this seminar, I had no idea that there was a difference between these 3 things, but in fact there is. And we briefly talked about it because it was kind of a big thing that we needed to understand before we could have the discussions, because we needed to understand when they're talking about certain efforts that they're making, exactly which one of like peacemaking, peace building, or peacekeeping it was. So peacemaking happens when there is a conflict that's going on currently. So it's the way that like the UN would address that conflict, and typically it's through diplomatic action between the 2 opposing sides of the conflict in order to help make peacemaking. Peace building is a preventative action that is hoping to prevent the conflict from happening in the first place. And it's a really long process that has to address core issues of like what would prevent the peace from happening in the future. And then peacekeeping is, it's like a supportive, supports the implementation, them implementing these policies or peace agreements that they would have made, and that can actually, they can use force to do that in order to protect themselves, their mandate, and civilians. And so peacekeeping isn't always seen as a super positive thing, that the UN is doing.
So what makes for effective or ineffective peace building?
Yeah, so I'll kind of talk about some ineffective ways, and then from that, show what is effective. And so one ineffective way of peace building, which would be like if you're a big organization like the United Nations, or if you're an NGO, or anyone that's wanting to help a situation, is assuming that you already know what to do going into the situation. So I would compare it to like trying to diagnose somebody that's having a mental health crisis without being trauma informed at all. And so the effective way of going about peace building would be to, one of the speakers described it as having the local actors' voices being the primary thing. And so consulting the people that are in the situation, that are already doing advocacy for peace, and asking them what they need and what the issues are and how they would like to go about having these issues resolved. Another ineffective and effective way would be that we heard was that a lot of times peace building work happens when there's a volcanic eruption of conflict. And so in a way, it is sort of like peacemaking when like the peace building work that should have been happening before only happens when conflicts actually occur. And so it's more like peacemaking. So yes, that's, and so instead there must be work that's done through programming and structures with the locals beforehand so that they can prevent violence from happening at the beginning. And then one other way that effective and ineffective peace building looks like is when there's a bad chain of accountability between the people that are doing local peace work and those that are trying to help from the outside, like the United Nations. So let's say there are people in civil society that want a policy changed, or they want to have a voice in a new policy or mandate that's going to be made, and they have conversation with people in the United Nations, but they have no idea if their recommendations even get heard or if it actually affects the policy. So there needs to be effective chains of accountability so that the people that are in civil society can know that their voices are heard.
Okay, going off book a little bit here, I just want to ask if one of you would be willing to share about a person that you met that was specifically impactful or interesting, just interesting, just an experience that you had, a person you met that you wouldn't have been able to experience if you hadn't gone.
So part of the seminar was so we were there a Wednesday through a Friday, and we were there for 2 mornings. And so Thursday and Friday morning, and both mornings they would have kind of like a devotional Bible study thing, I don't know, where like a speaker would come in and kind of lead us in a devotional in the morning. And both mornings, wonderful, wonderful women came and spoke to us. But I was especially moved on Friday by, would her title be, Reverend Dion? Yeah, anyways, her name was Dion. And she was just so cool. And the entire time that she was talking, my mouth was just wide open, just whoa, I've never met someone so cool in my life. She just had some really awesome stories about resilience and just getting to where she was, that and when she came to speak to us in the UN. And so, yeah, if I hadn't gone, I would not have been able to meet her.
Okay, and I guess lastly, I want to ask each of you to, if you could tell us a couple of questions, or a question you continued to wrestle with, a main takeaway, any number of those if you have a couple, and then also your favorite food that you tried while in New York.
I think my main takeaway from the seminar is to be an agent of peace with the work that I will do in my engineering career. One of the quotes that I read through when I had the UN tour was saying like the world is overarmed, and like the effort to make like peace, justice in the world is like really low. Like there's just so low budget that we put into it. That is the quote. Oh no, before it. Yeah, I think that one. Yeah. I had always seen the UN as a big body that is so cool and amazing. But I never had realized that there is a big loophole within the UN itself until I came to last year's and this year's seminar. I believe that each one of us has roles in building peace in the world and also meeting like people needs too. And we do not have to work in a huge organization such as the UN to be able to bring peace to the world. The UN is just a building, but what is really like we're trying to talk about there is like the lives of people and also their voices that are being fought for. Oh yeah, my favorite food is the Malaysian food. So Malaysia is a neighboring country to Indonesia, and our foods are pretty much similar. And we just had a lot of fun eating like Malaysian foods.
I would say, so the first devotional speaker in the morning, her name was Hyacinth Stevens, I think is how you say it. And she talked a little bit about the word truth in how it's, the word truth that we found in the scriptures in the Old Testament and what it's translating from. I think it's emit, as how you might say it. And often that word is translated as truth, but also it's used to describe faithfulness on the part of God. And she talked a lot about how to strive after the kind of truth that is discovered and found in faithful relationship with people. And I think that was a takeaway that I kind of applied to my own thinking, in where a lot of times we have beliefs about what is true and what is right and what should be done, and we hold those to ourselves and we try to advocate for that. And so if we come across somebody that disagrees, then the answer is just they're wrong, and we have to explain to them why they're wrong so they can come to believe our side. But maybe that way of thinking of truth might not be the best way about getting to the goal that you might have had with, what's going to be best for the world. And so it might be that searching for truth in faithful relationship with people, where there's give and take, where there's failure, and where there's learning, is the best way at finding helpful change. So,
Favorite food?
oh, yeah, I had good food. There was this like we went to Times Square, and there's this like was it Hershey's? It was a Hershey's like place, and they had like, there was like Hershey candles too. It didn't smell good because it was like, but I had this peanut butter chocolate cookie. It was good.
Man, I think my biggest takeaway from the entire time was, I think going into it and throughout, I guess, over the past couple of years of my life, when I've started to maybe pay more attention to current events, I tend to feel really helpless and like there's nothing that I can do. And I think in some aspect that is true, because, you know, like I don't have training to go and do like these big things that I think I should do. And I don't have the resources to necessarily do those things. But going to the UN and like meeting all of these people who like were our age, and also like these diplomats and these people working towards peace and everything like that, I felt like I had gained this new perspective on like my ability to make a difference, and to yeah, just through like learning that like I can educate myself, and like I can become more aware of new ways to spark peace, and that like people our age can bring a new perspective in to these discussions. And you know, like I'm obviously not going to become a diplomat like right away, like no. But that doesn't mean that like, I feel like this seminar just showed me that that doesn't mean that there aren't any spaces for our opinions to be heard, and for us to yeah, I guess kind of talk about you know, how these things come from our perspective. So, and man, I don't even know what my favorite food was. It was just all of it. Oh my gosh. But maybe I think more of the experience. But we went to a Cuban restaurant, and we were like up on the balcony, and they had live music, and like, oh my gosh, I had stuffed peppers. So good. Yeah, it was really, really good.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Are we?
First of all, let's give them a great big hand for this wonderful. Yep. I also want to say a thank you to John Murray, who works here with our international students, who was also there with them, and he was unable to be with us today, but we are very grateful to him. I think we have time for one question. Is there anything burning in your hearts? Let me ask you all a question, and then maybe this will be a whole new formation next term. Do you think that there's ever a time that higher-ups or people with authority don't listen to the local voices here at Hesston College? Do you ever feel like you maybe would be the number one person who could solve some problems, but you are not listened to? Is that a possibility? Yes? No? Do you feel listened to? We're building justice at Hesston College. No, yes? No? Yes. No. Not going to talk. Thank you. Okay. So anyway, thank you one more time. And I just want to say this. We professors and staff know how hard each one of you have been working. So thank you for joining us for this week where we celebrated our best work. Give these folks one more big round of applause, and we'll do attendance.